World Voice Focus, that theme music is so loud, but it's going soon, hopefully. Right.
It's very dramatic. I feel like I'm going to be, on some sort of political show here, which is not what I signed up for.
The new one's much more chilled out. I heard the first draft of it this morning. Mikey will absolutely hate it. Right, let's get started. Nottingham Forest now know what they need to do on the pitch to stay in the Premier League after their appeal against a 4-point deduction was rejected. Joining me to discuss the club's reaction, the independent panel's report, and the financial state of play heading into the summer is, first of all, the voice you heard just there in the Athletics Nottingham Forest reporter, Paul Taylor. Tails, good to have you with us. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you guys? You good?
Good, not bad. I said to Mikey before we started recording, I had to go and buy a new beard trimmer today because I've lost all the chargers to the 4 I've got. So I bought a replacement version of one I already have. So that was depressing.
You could buy a new charger, which is what I frequently have to do.
I should have done, but I just got the whole shebang. So yes, second guest also with us is Mikey Clarke. Mikey, how are you?
I'm all right. I reckon I'll be able to grow a beard in a few years. Yeah, no, I'm fine. Thanks. Good to be on with you guys.
Yeah, good to have you with us. You can kick us off, Mikey, from a fan point of view. We discussed it with Pete and Paul Morley yesterday. The report, not getting points back. I mean, when you read the report, it sounds like, we'll come on to this. It was given pretty short shrift. I don't think Forest are ever going to get points back when you read it. What's your reaction to the news?
Yeah, I don't know. I was really hopeful, not based on any facts. Obviously, that's come to fruition, and we were never going to get any points. But I was kind of hopeful we would. And after Saturday and the great weekend that we had, even a point back would have been huge and almost put us over the line. So I guess, not surprised. I know the guy said it yesterday. I'm not surprised we didn't get anything back. I'm just slightly gutted we didn't, because any sort of jeopardy that we've all got, I think, would have been put to bed. But I think this issue now, as I just said, has probably been put to bed, and we just need to learn from it and make sure that we can add up next year and don't overspend, because I can't be doing with all this stress. I know we can pull through the weeds a bit and talk about how the Premier League have dealt with it, which I think has been a shambles, but it just feels as if now we can put this to bed. It's still in our own hands. Another good result and we're over the line. But no, it's been so stressful, hasn't it? The whole thing.
Yeah, we will come on to that. That's on a couple of those points are on the list in the next 10 minutes or so. Tails, when you do read the report, I know there's a piece in The Athletic about it. Like I said, the panel do dismiss it quite. Forest appealed on 2 grounds, and they kind of brush them under the carpet pretty quickly and say, well, no, you didn't have a case there, so move on, basically. What was your take on it?
I don't know. I think Forest's case did have some foundation, but I guess if the first hearing didn't agree that Brennan Johnson's sale was a mitigating factor in Forest breach, then there was always going to be a danger that the appeal panel wouldn't either. Now, in my view, it should have been, because what Forest did all the way through the summer of last summer was tell the Premier League that their intention was to sell Brennan Johnson to make sure they ended up on the right side of this. They were clear not from the start, but throughout the entire summer that was their plan, that they might breach temporarily by a small amount of time, but they would be the right side of it by the time they got the best deal for Brennan Johnson. Now, the whole title of these rules is Profit and Sustainability Regulations. Now, are you telling me that profit and sustainability regulations should force a football club to make less profit and be less sustainable by selling a player that's got a value of £47 million, as it turns out, for £30 million a few weeks earlier, just to get the right side of these regulations? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me that is the stance that the Premier League seem to be taking. Now, we all know that the rules were there. They're there in black and white. Forest knew that they were breaching them. So, there's an argument to be made that they deserve to have some punishment for that. But the fact that it was kind of dismissed as a mitigating factor at all is a bit mystifying to me, because that's the whole crux of the case here, isn't it? That they delayed the sale of Brennan Johnson so that they got better value for money and made their club more sustainable by doing so. So the fact that they've been punished for that is a bit mystifying, or a bit hard to understand, at least.
I think as well, Mikey, there's going to be more. I was listening to some stuff earlier this morning. There's going to be more PSR problems on the horizon. Not we'll come on to Forest situation, but I mean in general, you've got Leicester City. I think Sheffield United are in trouble. Aston Villa and Newcastle are hard pressed, and then Chelsea are trying to put through their hotel sale as some kind of loophole, and then obviously the whole Manchester City thing, which is an awful look for the Premier League. And as Tails said there, one thing this feels like it's shown up is whatever we think about what Forest have done, it does feel like the rules are completely wrong and miss the point when they don't actually promote profit and sustainability if you're having to sell your best assets to meet an arbitrary deadline. To me,
yeah, I think you're right. I think, well, who said it yesterday? Was it Paul that said you're going to get like a Black Friday or something, a sale where the window closes and clubs are just going to be selling their assets just for once? I mean, that is just, it doesn't make any sense, as Taylor's quite brilliantly articulated. If the rules are in place to help clubs be sustainable, because you don't want another Portsmouth, you don't want another, all the clubs in the past that have suffered and got relegated and gone into administration. So the thought process for setting these up might have been positive in terms of, these are the reasons, but it's quite clearly doesn't work, which is why the rules are being changed. But I'm hoping we look back in a few years' time and go, oh, crikey, can you remember the 2022-23 season? Do you remember when clubs just had to sell and we breached it? And people go, really? Did you do that? I'm like, yeah. And it's just bonkers to me. So I'm not, the rules next year or even the year after might not be right, and it might force sales early, and you'll get clubs sniffing around because they think they can get a bit of a bargain. But until they get it right, you're always going to get this, and we just have to make sure that even though every person I talk to thinks these rules are just bonkers and make no sense, we just need to make sure we understand them and make sure we're operating within those guidelines, even though they seem weird and unfair and favouring the top sort of echelon clubs that have that huge income of huge commercial income and fan bases all around the world. We're trying to compete with that. We're never going to until they change the rules, but it just feels mad, doesn't it? Like I've tried to read up on it before today a little bit, and it just makes no sense whatsoever. So I'm just hoping we put it to bed. Everybody understands where we are going forward, and we don't do this again, because we struggle enough as it is to compete in this league. We don't want to be peeing people off in order to get punishment that really sets us back as a football club. And I'm hoping we fall on the right side of it this year, manage to stay up. We just have to make sure we don't do that again. And it's so unfair and it's mad, but we all understand what it is now. And we've got to draw a line under it and move forward as a club and as a fan base, I think.
Forest weren't operating on a level playing field either, were they? I mean,
No.
That's the thing that people often overlook, and mainly fans of opposition clubs who are saying like, "Oh, you spent like crazy." Forest did sign a lot of players. There's no escaping that. But they also were in a situation where they were only allowed to lose, I think, £61 million over the course of 3 years. Every established Premier League club is allowed to lose £105 million. So you've got clubs like Forest who are trying to gain a foothold amongst the elite, and immediately the whole system works against them because they're not allowed to spend or lose the same amount of money as the teams they're trying to compete with. Forest realistically had to rebuild their entire squad, which is what they did. They had to rebuild their entire squad to compete in the Premier League. That's why they made so many signings. There's an argument to be made that they went a little bit far with that, but I don't think they went that far over what they needed to do. They needed to sign a lot of players. They signed a lot of players, and now they find themselves in this situation where they're being punished for just wanting to be competitive in an environment that they fought for 23 years to get back into. I don't think you should be punished for actually wanting to get a foothold back in the Premier League when you've been out of it for so long. Look at Sheffield United. They basically, from day one, raised the white flag, said they hadn't got the money to do it, didn't really invest in the team to any great deal, knew they were probably going to be relegated. Is that what the Premier League want? Is that what Forest should have done? Should they have gone up and gone, oh, well, we'll just enjoy this season and we'll see you again in another 20 years? It's probably not that, but that's what it feels like. And I don't think Forest should be punished for trying to buck the trend and actually earn themselves that foothold that they fought so hard to get in the first place.
Thank you very much to Sarah for doing my job. If you haven't already, do us a favour, hit like and do subscribe to the channel. And thank you to Sadie for becoming a member as well. Appreciate the support. Sadie, I think Tails, have you sort of touched on the Forest internal reaction there? I want to ask you about that because it was noticeable. They didn't put a statement out, and I'll ask you a little bit about that. But is that the sentiment within the football club, or are they just absolutely raging, or are they just going to draw a line under it and move on? How have they reacted internally to yesterday's news?
I think they've raised the drawbridge for now, and they just want to focus on the last 2 games and getting the job done and not have any more distractions, because this is what this has been. And I think the Premier League are responsible for that to some degree. I think what we saw last week, there was an anticipation at the club that Forest would get news more than a week ago of the appeal verdict, and it didn't happen. And in my mind, and maybe I was putting 2 together and making 5 here, once they didn't give news before the round of matches last weekend, you kind of presumed that they hadn't done that because Forest were perhaps going to get a point back, and they didn't want that to create any kind of drama ahead of the big games that Forest and Burnley and Luton all had last weekend. So that as I say, that was just a case of me putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with the wrong answer. But when the news came out that they hadn't had any kind of points back, you kind of thought, well, why didn't they just announce it at the end of last week? Then what difference does it make? Why the delay? And that whole delay has created this drama and this distraction that has been a factor in the Forest dressing room. So I think their reaction to this was just to raise the drawbridge, say we're going to get through this period, get the points we need. And I don't necessarily think that we have heard the end of this. I think at some point there probably will be a response of some kind from Forest. I don't think they're just going to, let things move on without them saying something at some point. But we'll see. Hopefully they can get the points that they need to stay up in the next 2 games. Hopefully this weekend against Chelsea, and repeat last season when they beat Arsenal to secure survival with a game left. Hopefully we'll see the same thing this weekend, and then they can worry about everything else and stage an inquest into PSR, VAR, and all the other nonsense that's been a cloud over the club and this season throughout.
Was it influenced at all by the post Everton comments? Did they think it's better to keep our powder dry for now then, Tails?
There was a degree of surprise at Forest about the reaction and the scale of the headlines that the statement they put out after Everton generated. In Greece, it's more, the environment there is one where criticism of the authorities and criticism of referees, even by clubs in a very, very strident fashion, is normal. It's a routine. A Greek journalist I know sent me a lot of links to club tweets and club social media comments, not just from Olympiacos, but from other clubs as well, where they're very strident in their views and openly criticise the authorities, borderline accuse them of corruption, in some cases outright accuse them of corruption. So to Evangelos Marinakis and the rest of the Greek hierarchy at Nottingham Forest, the statement they put out wasn't anything out of the ordinary. If anything, it was toned down from what you sometimes see in Greece. And I think they were caught out by the fact that it was seen as something so out of the norm and so headline worthy on in England, on this side of Europe. And so in a very long-winded way, I think the answer to the question to some degree is probably yes, but I think while that might have been a factor, I think it is more genuinely to do with just wanting the focus now to be on the football when that is the primary concern. Forest aren't going to get any points back. They aren't going to have any kind of help in avoiding relegation off the pitch. So now they've got to get the job done themselves. It's not going to happen behind a desk. It's not going to happen in an office. It's got to happen on the grass, and they've got to get the points that they need against Chelsea, hopefully. And please don't put us through having to go to Burnley on the final day needing something, because I'm not sure I could take that.
Just wrapping this up then, Mikey, before we move on, does it feel like has this been a bit of an eye-opener this season in terms of there's been a few clouds over it, as you referenced, and maybe the owners will, I don't know if they'll review how they communicate or not. It's up to them, isn't it, really? But there's been a few things that have cast a cloud over the season, not most notably the points deduction. I kind of feel like we can't be here next season talking about PSR and stuff like that. We need to have just a more stable environment. I feel it gives Nuno a better chance of success, or whoever's manager, if it's a bit more just a stable environment, I guess. What do you think about that?
totally agree. I think we just need to draw a line under it as a club, as a fan base, as everybody that talks about it and goes through. You know, the enjoyment of the game has been diluted because of all this nonsense. So there's been all the stuff around all the horrible refereeing decisions we've got, people's integrity being called into question. You know, it's happened time and time again over the last. And I just want to go to a football game and see if my team can win and support them. All the stuff that goes off behind the curtain. Sometimes we're fortunate enough to have a peek, and some of it shocks us, and some of it doesn't. But it seems as if the curtain's just been open all season. We've just seen too much of it, and it takes away from what this should all be about. And I just hope if we just learn one thing, it's just keep your finances in order. If we're peed off about something, just do it in the right way, however way that is, and let's sort of die this view of corruption. Or let's just die it down a little bit, because I genuinely don't think there is a big corruption issue. I just think we've been on the wrong end of so much. I can understand why some people do think there's a bit of there's something against Forest, because when it happens once or twice, 3 or 4 times, it's like, oh God, you've had some bad luck. It's happened over a dozen times. Crap decisions, points deductions, impending fines, things hanging over us, appeals. It's been absolutely mentally and physically draining. And I just hope that this is now a watershed. We draw a line under it. We get the points on Saturday and move on. And then next season, we're not talking about any of this nonsense, because there's so much we can sort out and do better on the pitch. And I want to see Forest progress on the pitch rather than talk about some of the rubbish off it. If that answers your question, Matt.
Do you think as well, Tails, from that, do you think the Premier League they've handled this so badly? I don't believe the corruption stuff either, but I can see why people do when there's so little transparency. And also Forest opened a hand grenade with that Luton tweet that's kind of opened a bit of a can of worms. But the Premier League haven't helped here, have they? It feels like, to me, they've handled this pretty badly from start to finish, just around Forest and PSR in general.
I think, yeah, I'll start by saying I do have some sympathy for Forest in that they did, before this statement, before taking the step of being publicly and very clearly and very stridently critical, they did try to go down the right path. They wrote letters to the PGML. They had meetings with the PGMOL. They appointed Mark Clattenburg, which is a whole different subject. I admit it was an experiment that didn't really work, but they did it for the right reasons. They wanted somebody who could be a conduit between them and the authorities to discuss where and why these refereeing decisions were all going against them, and why they felt victimized and what was going to change because of everything they've been through. So they tried to do things in the right way, and then ultimately they got frustrated and said, well, all right, we're just going to say what we think, I think. And it perhaps went a bit too far by our standards here. It was an extraordinary statement. But yeah, I've forgotten the second part of the question.
The way just the lack of transparency around even basic things like, you breach by this much, you get 3 points. You breach by this much, you get 6 points. This is when the appeal is. This is when the results are. And this is when it's going to be announced within 5 days. I know they said within 7 days, and they went beyond that. And it does create, it creates a window for fans to question things at the very least, doesn't it?
I actually felt sorry for the people who were on both panels, both the initial panel and the hearing panel, because they literally have no guidelines. There's nothing in black and white that says a club has done this, so the punishment should be this, or even a broad guideline. A club has done this, so it's within your scope to say something between here and here. There was nothing. It was nothing was arbitrary. It was just you've got to decide what happens next, and all they had to go on was what had happened before, which was a very limited and probably slightly different case with Everton. So it was always felt a little bit haphazard. It always felt a little bit lick your finger and stick your finger in the air and see which way the wind's blowing and decide what the punishment's going to be. That was the difficult part for me, that I didn't understand. And you want some clarity in rules like this. If rules are going to be put in place that dock clubs points and could potentially relegate them from the Premier League and all the costs that come with that, they've got to be more clear. They've got to be very clearly defined and give clubs a chance to understand what punishment they've got and why. I think that'll be the problem for Forest. I don't think they'll understand quite how the both the hearing and the appeal hearing have come to a judgment that they've lost 4 points. Where's that figure come from? I don't know. And I don't think they will, because the rules are going to change again in the future. And I imagine that'll be another minefield for us to walk through in a different way.
True. Well, the Premier League wanted 8 points initially, and Richard Masters gave some testimony at appeal where he said, it should be this, this, and this, and that totted up to 13 points, I remember, or 14 points. So, yeah, it's been a bit of a mess from the start. Quick word for our sponsors before we move on. Trent Navigation, of course. The last day of the Premier League season, we are at Burnley. It might be on TV. Hopefully it's not, because it means we're safe, but you can enjoy all the action and drama around the last day of the Premier League at the Trent Navigation. And before that, of course, it is the Rick Parfitt Junior gig on Saturday after the Chelsea game. Hopefully it is a survival party. Hopefully the game's a survival party. Obviously, if Luton and Burnley lose, then it is. We'll get to some on-field chat shortly. Just the other thing, Tales, I want to ask about is PSR is not going away. Forest going to have to submit accounts again, or like all other clubs. It feels like they're under pressure to some degree, I guess. The fans are worried that we're going to have to sell Murillo or Gibbs-White or both, or a load of fringe players to scramble over the June deadline. What's your understanding? What's your take on where they are as a club with accounts right now?
I think they will have to make a big sale. I don't think that is something that should perhaps be regarded as dramatic. I think it's a blueprint that a lot of clubs have followed in recent years and done so very successfully. You look at Brighton; they've made it an art form of signing good players for decent money and developing them a little bit and selling them for outstanding money. And I think that is the pathway, or I know that's the pathway that Forest would like to follow. It's just the financial world that they're in at this minute. That's the way you have to operate. If you want to invest in your team, you're going to have to raise some money somehow, and that's going to be by signing a player like Murillo, for example, for I think it was £11 million ultimately. He's probably worth 50, 60, 70. I know the club think the higher echelons of that. If they could sell him for £70 million in the summer, then they've kind of done their job, in the sense that then that would give them the freedom of not worrying about PSR, please, and being able to invest in the team at the same time. I think that's just the landscape of things now. It's not a criticism of Forest. I think that's just the way they're going to have to operate if they want to stay on the right side of these rules in the future, because Premier League wage bills are massive. And not every signing, as we know, not every signing is going to be a success. What I would say about Forest is that a lot of them have been. You look at the performance last weekend and the players that stood out. You had Sells, who's been brilliant, certainly in comparison to the previous players who've occupied his position. Murillo was brilliant again. Bolly looks like an outstanding investment for just, I think, 2.5 million, rising up to about 4 million. All the way through the team, the spine of the team just was full of players that looked like good signings. Chris Wood, even, look how much people derided Chris Wood when he first signed. I know he's had, should we say, a few missed chances in recent games, but without his goals this season, ultimately Forest would probably have been relegated by now. So I think you have to say that the blueprint is almost there. If you are going to sell a player every summer and you invest it in other good players, then eventually you can end up with a stronger squad, and that should improve your position as time goes by. The key is having more hits than misses, and I think that's that's something that Forest have to work on.
I suppose, Mikey, it would be sad if Murillo goes. You heard his endearing interview at the weekend post-match, but if you have to lose someone for big money, I feel like it probably is him. I'd much rather lose him than Gibbs-White, good as he is. Where would you be on the sort of Sophie's choice conundrum there?
Yeah, I think Tales is hitting the nail on the head. I think you just even before we got in the Premier League, we were always selling one really good player a year. It's the food chain, isn't it? We need to compete, and if it does mean that we can put to bed any PSR always going forward, then that's what we need to do. Tales is quite right, highlighting Brighton as a shining example. If we can get anywhere near them, then we're doing a great job. But I think in terms of hand picking a player, perhaps that they bought cheaply in inverted commas and could get a great profit for, then someone like a Murillo or Danilo, for example, they're the two that probably stand out. It's nice to see Danilo back in the team. I think his value will not go up if he's not playing. So I think it might be one of them. My gut says Murillo, if I'm honest, because he's got, I come on here all the time. I think the world of him. I think he's a great player and he can do whatever he wants to do in the game. I think in a couple of years' time he could be playing anywhere in the world. I think he's that good. He's playing here in albeit a struggling team and standing out because of the skills and the profile that he has. So I think Forest would be wise to look at suitors for him, perhaps. And then if they get anywhere near the figures that Tails has just mentioned, then he'll be off. But in the long run, it should sustain us. And if they invest properly, which is why I really liked the last window, I think we bought 3 players. One was a keeper and we needed. One was a young kid who showed a bit of promise. And the other one was a guy on loan, I think, Lona. So we don't need to buy 10, 12, 14 players. We just need to target areas we need an upgrade from. We need to replace somebody that goes, something like a Murillo. And there are some very good, experienced centre-backs that could come in and do a really solid job. And then you have those funds to be able to trade. So, yeah, I'm with Tails. It's just the way it is. We've just got to get over the line, stay up. And if somebody wants to write a cheque for 60, 70 million for Murillo, then he'll be off. But I don't think there's anything we should worry about because, I think we'll invest in it wisely, fingers crossed.
People in the comments, Tails, I see on Twitter as well, saying, oh, well, if we just sell O'Brien, Vlachodimos, Turner, Emmanuel Dennis before June 30th, then that would solve the problem. Mangala as well. Would that work? I mean, I don't know if that's even feasible. Clubs are going to sense blood and just offer pennies for these players, I would suspect, which is, part of the issue. But would that get Forest over the line realistically or not? Or do you still think they've got to sell Murillo or Gibbs-White?
I think they'd have to do that as well, to be fair. There's a lot of players who, if Forest stay in the Premier League, will be surplus to requirements. O'Brien's one of them. It's harsh because he was such a good servant to the club and got them, played a key role in getting them into the Premier League. But I think, Joe Worrell's another one they could sell. I'm not thinking that any of these players are going to be players that generate vast transfer fees. We're probably talking several £1 million, but not 70 like you'd get from Murillo, that's for sure, even if you combine them all together. So whilst I think they will be looking to sign a few of those, sell a few of those peripheral players, I don't think that's going to be the overall solution to the problem, if you like. I don't think there's a world in which Forest can sell all their peripheral players and then still get the right side of PSR, unfortunately. I just don't think it would be enough. You need a big sale to get you through, particularly if you want to invest. There might be a world in which they could sell the peripheral players and just say, right, this is our squad. But I think if you want to go out and sign 3, 4 quality players this summer, then you're going to have to raise the funds for that, or not so much raise the funds, because Evangelos Marinakis is a rich man who would probably just back Forest if he was allowed to, but they need to create the freedom within these financial regulations to be able to go out and make these signings, and that will mean probably making a big sale this summer.
Yeah, that's the key thing I was going to say, Mikey. Like, this team next season doesn't finish particularly much higher than it is now. There's younger players who are going to improve, but we still need to sign, another centre half, regardless, and then probably another centre midfielder and another winger. So, this squad needs investing in, doesn't it, to progress?
Certainly does, and we need a striker as well, I think, because I don't know whether you can rely on Taiwo to stay fit. History tells you probably can't. So I think it does need significant investment again down the spine of the team. And you guys are absolutely right. The only way to do that is to ship out, for want of a better phrase, those fringe players that are taking up the wages, if anybody will have them, but you're not going to get big money for doing that. If you sell somebody like a Murillo, it gives you freedom to trade. And, we don't want to fall foul of these rules, however stupid we all think they are. We need to stay in there because we've seen the punishments and we're still suffering from them. So you've got to remember as well, it's and I don't know whether the rules are changing, but if it's still that 3-year window that keeps rolling over, then you're going to still take into account some stuff you've done previously. So you're not starting from scratch, as in, you can only lose 36 million or whatever. No, it's going to be a bit of a drag. So we are going to have to trade really sensibly. But I do think that there will be an inevitable big sale. But again, if it allows you to upgrade, then you have to. Look what happened with West Ham, for example. So they sell Declan Rice for a hell of a lot of money. He's a top player. But look who they invested in off the back of that. So they re-signed Jared Bowen to a long contract. They bought that Alvarez in midfield. They strengthened the centre backs. You know, they look a proper team now. And again, they finished 6th, 7th after winning a trophy last year. So it's just about how you trade. And in order to do that, we need to sell. So I'm not overly worried about it. The only thing I'm worried about is getting another point to stay up. And then we can have all these debates about who's coming knocking for who. But the good thing is, Matt, I think you touched on it there. You know, we've got a lot of young players who will get better and better and better. You look at the spine of that side that we have on Saturday. You've got, 21-year-old at centre back. Omar Bamideli's dropped out the team, but he was playing alongside him. He's another kid. You've got Danilo in midfield, Hudson-Odoi, Elanga, Gibbs-White. They're all early 20s. They're all going to get better and better and more experienced. So there is some saleable assets there. It's not as if we've got a team of my age knocking around, that just won't generate any funds. There are one or two players we can sell for some profit, and they should be looking to do that. So I'm not overly worried.
I've turned Mikey's volume up. A couple of people saying he's quiet. Sounds fine here, but hopefully that makes a difference. Right, let's talk football tales. Mikey says West Ham are a proper team. Let's hope they're a proper team because they're going to need to be at the weekend. How are you feeling about where we're at, where Luton, Burnley, West Ham, Spurs are? It all melds into one thing now with 2 games to go. What's your take on the bigger picture?
I think you just have to worry about yourselves because you don't know that Burnley or Luton aren't going to pull out a surprise result. They're perfectly capable of it. And I think you can't be keeping one eye on, on the internet or on your phone to find out what the scores are elsewhere. You have to be just doing the job yourselves. Forest are more than capable of getting something against Chelsea. And I know I'm not for a minute saying it's easy. It isn't. In Cole Palmer, they've got one of the most outstanding players in the Premier League this season. He's been absolutely brilliant. And part of me in one sense is actually quite looking forward to seeing him play in the flesh, but hopefully he won't do too well. I just think you all you can do, you can't worry about anything else. You can't worry about all the different narratives and all the possibilities. Just focus on getting your own result this weekend. Do what you need to do against Chelsea. Then look at the other scores and think, oh, well, it didn't really matter, did it? But we've got the job done anyway. Don't look at the permutations because you'll just end up on the wrong side of it, and that scares me. Just try and do what they did against Arsenal last year. Try and get a result that might surprise a few people, but one that will keep Forest in the Premier League and ensure that they can go, as they did to Crystal Palace last year, and go and have a bit of a party at Burnley rather than watching the game through their fingers, hoping that the worst doesn't happen.
I guess they do need to look after themselves, don't they, Mike? Tales is right. When you see videos of Fulham players flying kites in training with like Copacabana music or whatever it was in the background on Jimenez's TikTok, you think probably can't quite rely on Fulham, so we're going to have to get the job done ourselves.
Yeah, we're going to have to. I totally agree. Yeah, that when you sent me that, I was like, what's this? I was looking at thinking, still 2 games left. So yeah, let's not rely on anybody else. But I think a lot of the job was done on Saturday. I'm not as confident as some of the guys on here attempt saying we're still up and all that sort of stuff, because anything can happen. And as Tails quite rightly says, Luton are very capable going to West Ham, who are in a bit of flux now because obviously the manager's leaving. So they could go there and win 1-0 potentially. I don't think they will, but they might. But we just have to look after ourselves. And I think if anything gives us heart, anybody watching or listen to this, look at our last 2 performances. So we put up a hell of an effort against arguably the best team in the world and 2-0 flattered them. I thought we were great at playing a formation, which I think we'll play on Saturday. And then we go to Sheffield United in a hugely pressurised game and come out the right side of it. We could have easily got done 1-0 then. And it looked for a time that we were going to get done 1-0, but they didn't. They knuckled down, they got in at half time, and we turned it around second half. So the last couple of weeks have told me that this team's got enough. But like Taylor says, I'm not expecting any favours at 3 o'clock on Saturday at all. And I think we will need something, even if it's just a point. But I said weeks ago that we'll get it against Chelsea. And I think we will. I think it'll be a great day. I think that the crowd will rule them on. to get what they need, and I think we'll be celebrating Saturday night. Premonition, I can see it now.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really tight game. I mean, Chelsea are really much improved, but one thing that James points out in the commentary, they've only won one game away in the calendar year. That was at Palace before they had, Elise Eze and Mateta was transformed. And we do have a good record against them in the Premier League the last 2 seasons. Do you read anything into that, Tails, the fact that, we haven't lost to them or not? Is that just a bit of an old wives' tale type thing?
But maybe it's just this cynical mindset that I've got. But when I see a stat like that, the first thing that actually popped into my head was, well, Forrester only kept 1 clean sheet in 2024. Maybe I've just been ground down by, years of disappointment until the last few years, which have been great, to be fair. I don't know. Stats like that don't mean a lot to me. If you start relying on stats like that, you just end up with egg on your face normally. Just get the job done. Forest, Mikey's right. The last 2 games, Forest have been very, very impressive. They were unlucky. I don't think it would have been an injustice if they'd have beaten Manchester City. They played that well and had enough opportunities to have done so. When we're actually a little bit, I would say they're unlucky not to get something. They really were. And then they went to Sheffield United, and the second half performance was one of real character, purpose, and threat. And that's all they need to do. Just produce a performance that's akin to either of those. Hope Chris Wood finds his shooting boots again, and Callum Hudson-Odoi, he's going to have a point to prove, isn't he, against his former club? He's going to want to show them what he can do, as he has done, or as he did do brilliantly at Bramall Lane. I get really excited about him. I like players when opposition defenders kind of know what he's going to do. They know he's going to get the ball on the left-hand side, cut it onto his right foot, shoot across goal inside the far post. But it doesn't seem like half the time there's much they can do about it. So hopefully he'll, get into that stride again this weekend, and we can all have a relaxing Saturday night. The other dynamic that we've not discussed yet, which both concerns and, it could either be a brilliant positive or painful negative, is the fact that Forest will know the result of the other 2 games before they kick off. So they could technically almost know if they're going to be safe or not before they've even kicked a ball, which would change the dynamic hugely. Whereas alternatively, if Luton or Burnley or both of them win, then the pressure is only going to pile on even more. And there's a whole other debate to be had about whether that's even fair. They make the games on the final day kick off at the same time because they want it to be a level playing field. Is there a case to be made that it's not a level playing field this weekend because of the fact that Forest will know the result before they play? I'm not sure it is.
I suppose, yeah. I think to me, Mikey, as long as they don't both win, I think it's a positive. If say Luton win or Burnley win, then we just know, okay, we need a point. The goal difference will save us or whatever. But if they both win, can you imagine? God, how nervous will you be at kickoff if they both won on Saturday?
Very, but that's not going to happen. Look at their results. Honestly, it's not. It's not, mate. Honestly, look at their results in the last 6 months. I think Luton have won 1 in 16. Burnley just got done 4-1 at home. Are Burnley really going to get to Tottenham and beat Tottenham? I know Tottenham have lost the last 4, but Tottenham at home is a very different proposition than Spurs away. And West Ham, let's just hope that they do want to give Moyes a good send-off. So to expect 2 teams that have been struggling even worse than us, have got 1 or 2 wins between them in the last 6 months, to both win on the same day when the pressure is the highest it's ever been this season, I just can't see it. I think they'll both get beat, if I'm honest. And then it's just a case of we just don't need to lose 10-0, do we? But 1 point will then do it. I think you'll get a few twists and turns at 3 o'clock. You might get goals at either end, but I just can't see it, because I talk to people that aren't Forest fans, and they're not emotionally invested like we are, and they just see it for what it is, and they just say to me, "Are they really going to go there and win?" What gives you that thought process that that's going to happen? And the revert back is, well, it's the Premier League, anything can happen. But you're thinking, well, if you've got a fiver to stick on it, what are you going to stick on? I just can't. I genuinely can't see either of them winning. I think they'll both get beat, and I think it will be a great day. But as Tails quite rightly says, if something weird does happen and Luton get a point, or Burnley go there and do Spurs 1-0 with their only shot on goal, we just have to go and get the job done. play like we've played in the last 2 games, and we'll be absolutely fine. Like I'm genuinely confident, and I think Chelsea away are very different than Chelsea at home. You know, we saw what they did to West Ham last week, and also they played very well in the FA Cup semi-final. But I think, you know, going away, they are a bit flaky away. What was it, one win this year? So again, you know, Forest at home are a different kettle of fish. Our last home performance was magnificent. We just need to turn up and do the business, and we'll be fine. But I know I'm being dead positive, right? But I, honestly, if you see me in the pub at 3 o'clock, I'll be checking the scores. I'll just be like, oh my God, what's going on? But genuinely, I just can't see either of those 2 teams winning. And if I'm right, we'll be okay.
What's your take on Nuno's work this season, Tails? I was pretty sceptical around the Brighton, Luton away games, Villa away, the team selection. I thought, you know, he was making some odd decisions. Mikey, I don't know if Mikey agrees with this. I feel like he's slowly coming into the job, and it feels like he knows 9 of the 11 now, probably maybe even 10 of the 11 with Bolly fit and firing. Touch wood. Do you feel like Nuno's hitting his straps, to use a cricket term, now or not?
I think he's starting to find his feet a little bit. Yeah, I went through a period where I was a little bit skeptical. You kind of looked at where things had improved in comparison to Steve Cooper's tenure, and there was a long spell where it was hard to come up with a long list of things that were vastly better. I think it's, and this isn't a cop-out, but I think it's extraordinarily hard to judge Nuno on the job he's done this season with complete authority, purely because of everything he's had to handle, which has been out of the norm. There's been these tide of VAR decisions that have been quite remarkable, some of them. I haven't actually sat down and gone through it and looked through how many points Forest could have had back in theory had VAR been better, but I imagine it's a lot. I imagine they'd already be safe by now. When you look at, I mean, some of them, like, you know, some of them would definitely have ended up with Forest getting more points. Then there's the whole PSR thing, which is another kettle of fish entirely. Without that, they would have been safe by now. So there's been so many things that he's had to deal with that are out of the norm when you're trying to assess the job that he's done. I'm not for a minute saying he's been brilliant. I don't think he has. I think he's been middling. But in the circumstances, is that quantifiably something that he would have done better without all these sideshows and influences? We'll find out next season, if he's still in charge, what he's capable of doing. And I think that's probably a fairer time to assess what he's capable of at this football club. Give him the time to get his feet under the table without all these distractions, without everything else that's been going off, and just see how he gets on. Whether he'll get that opportunity is a different matter entirely. I think there's other reasons for him to need to do well in the last 2 games beyond simple survival. I think he probably needs to get another couple of decent performances under his belt with Forest, just to improve his own job security, if we're frank.
Ah, interesting. Yeah. Well, you feel he's under scrutiny? I mean, every Forest manager's under scrutiny, Tails, aren't they? I guess that's like the norm.
I wouldn't go as far as saying that, you know, he's got to win the next 2 games to keep his job by any means, but, you know, every Forest manager is going to be under the microscope at any given time, and I wonder how the hierarchy might look at the job he's done so far and you know, assess those things. I think I think in the summer they are going to sit down. There's no escaping that. They're going to sit down and decide whether he's the right man for the job moving forward, because that's just natural. That's what would happen at the club every summer, and it's happened probably every previous summer. Is he the right? Have we got the right head coach? Have we got the right strikers? Have we got the right midfielders? Where do we need to improve? And the head coach would come under that, you know, area of analysis. The club will look at whether they've got the right man in charge, just because that's what they do every summer. I'm not saying that there's some kind of dramatic line in the sand that's been drawn that he's got to win the next 2 games to keep his job. That's not what I'm saying at all. But he will come under a degree of scrutiny this summer for the job he's done so far, and when it comes to whether the hierarchy believe he's the right man for the job moving forward. That's just normal. And just my point of view at this point is that the job he has done hasn't been amazing. It's been okay. Like I said, there's lots of factors that add into that have influenced the kind of job he's done. I think he's had his hands tied to some degree, and he's had results that have gone against Forest that have been no fault of his whatsoever. So I think you have to look at things through that lens and then make a judgment on him. And I think the fairest thing to do, when you take all of those things into account, would probably be to look at the job he does next season, when hopefully there'll be no PSR, there'll be no VAR nonsense, and you can assess the job he does as manager perhaps a little bit more fairly.
Yeah, and they can defend set pieces as well.
Oh God, yeah, I forgot that.
That's the controllable that they failed on mostly. I mean, not just Nuno, just the whole season they failed on that, certainly. Right, just before we go on to any of the business, if you haven't already, do us a favour, hit like, hit subscribe, do become a channel member if you can, and give us a lovely review on iTunes and a 5-star review on Spotify. Right, any other business anything else you want to add, Mikey?
Only one thing from me. Firstly, I've enjoyed this. It's great to catch up with you guys. I think Saturday, just going back to Saturday, I don't know whether Forza are planning anything. We might need to ask Greg. But I keep seeing things on social media around showing up in red, painting the sitting ground red, all that sort of stuff. I keep seeing that quite a lot, and I think that's a great idea. And I think, with it being on TV and the fact that we are so close to the finishing line, it's just a plea for one last big effort from me, all my mates, everybody that goes down there, just to wear red, be as loud as you can, support the guys, push them over the line, and then we can have a party on the last day. But I'm almost supremely confident we're going to do it. Almost. But yeah, we shall see. And if we do, I predicted the Sheffield United score, didn't I? 3-1. I'm saying that again. I actually think we'll draw on Saturday, and I think it'll be enough. So I'm going for 1-1 on Saturday.
Yeah, one prediction out of 35 is encouraging. Well, Tails, you've got a lot to answer for, actually. Not it maybe of life in general, but the reason Mikey Clarke is on this podcast, going back to our Garibaldi Red days, I'm sure it's you, because you recommended him, I think. So if you want to offer any kind of public apology now, then this is your forum.
Oh, mate, come on. I apologise for Mikey, can I?
Do you have anything else you want to plug, work-wise, or anything else you want to add before we depart, Tails?
I just add to what Mikey said about the fans, to be fair. I mean, I've covered Forest for my first season was when Gary Megson was in charge, so that's how far back that goes. And what I would say is I've never seen the City Ground as passionate and spine-tinglingly noisy and partisan as it has been in the last few years. And I think that's been perhaps the biggest factor in Nottingham Forest still being a Premier League club now. And I think it will be a big factor again this weekend, for all the bad feeling perhaps that, PSR, VAR, and if we're honest, the season ticket price rises has created. So this weekend is the time to put all of that to one side and just get back to being that partisan, raucous and amazing place that it has been over the last few years, and that will only help the team get over the finishing line. And there's been lots of special memories the last few years, even for a neutral covering the club, or a supposed neutral. And it'd be nice just to have one more this weekend that would get Forest over the finishing line and ensure a third season of Premier League football. Because you know what, if they can stay up, then it feels like there is something to build on. Like there are positives there that can ensure, with a bit more stability, a little bit more calmness, that next season could be one where Forest do take a step towards establishing themselves as, somebody who could have a long seat at the top table, if you like, and become a regular fixture in the Premier League and not perhaps have to worry about relegation next season. So it feels like a real landmark moment this weekend, and hopefully it'll prove to be a happy memory like the one against Arsenal last year. And like I said earlier, you can go to Burnley and just have one big party and look forward to next season with a bit of positivity.
Yeah, the building blocks are certainly in place with, Sells, two good fullbacks. Will Aina be here next season, Tails, do you think?
I don't see why not. He seems to fit the bill, doesn't he?
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, so him, two good wingers, Touchwood number 10 in Gibbs-White. Midfield's the area you've got to fix, whether it's internally or externally, I think, and we might have to buy a striker. But yeah, the building blocks are there. Tails, you can put yourself further on my in my good books if you answer this question right. Do you put chocolate in the fridge? Yes or no?
Yes.
Good lad.
Literally sinking behind my mic filter. That's so depressing.
Why wouldn't you? You don't want melted chocolate, do you?
You have room temperature chocolate. I'm disappointed. It's a shame this podcast's at the end because I know people in the comments might start answering, in the fridge or not in the fridge. But Mikey thinks it should be in the fridge, and no. I'm going to end this on a sour note.
Go and enjoy your melted Mars bar, you weirdo.
Yeah.
Right, we shall leave it there. Enjoyed that for the last 50 minutes. Good to have 450 people with us. We are back tomorrow with the match preview and then opposition preview on Friday and post-match on Saturday. I think people are answering now. Oh, people are saying in the fridge. I'm disappointed in you all. Oh, no. Laura Mitchell says that as well. Deary me. Right, good to have everyone with us. Mikey, thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure. Cheers, guys.
Tails, thank you very much. Good to have you with us again.
Thanks for having me. Been a pleasure.
It has. Have a good day, everyone. Enjoy your room temperature chocolate, and we shall see you soon.